Hello, hello. Very well. Yeah, doing good. Thanks for asking. We're here today, August 3rd, 9 o'clock Mountain Time. We are doing our ZENcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to cover a couple topics today, and I hope it's meets up to your standards. We got a couple of things going on. We have the ZCM Imaging with WinPE Part 2. However, sorry to say, it's not the complete Part 2. Unfortunately, Moises got tied up and isn't able to attend today, but he gave me a couple of videos that we can go through. The two most common questions in when he gets calls from for imaging. So if you know Moises, you know that he's a specialist on this, on the backline support, and knows it well. So he gave me a couple of videos that I'll narrate, and then we'll also get into how ZCM handles disasters. So that's our bonus for today, since we don't have a complete time with Moises. But he did say that he wanted to get back with us and cover more demos, live demos soon. I have him on the October already, right? October agenda. So we have September tied up, and October was the next available slot. So we're good to go there. I look forward to that time, but we're going to go ahead and do some housekeeping first. I hope everything's okay with lighting and stuff. I've kind of adjusted a few things, but we're going to get into ZENcast Live. So we meet the first and third Tuesday of each month, 9 o'clock Mountain Time. You can also subscribe to Micro Focus Support and Training channel, and that will also get you some details on different past streams, as well as the current notifications when we go live. So if you did, details and recordings can be found out on the Unified Endpoint Management site for, let me get this settled. I didn't want that. I wanted that. Okay. Oh, and let me turn my other volume down here. Okay, so you can always see our playlists for the different ZENworks products out here, and there are playlists for others as well. So if you have Filer, if you have iPrint, if you have any of the other products, the Micro Focus Support and Training site is for you. We also have our upcoming schedule. If you wanted to know when our schedule is, we're also trying to get to update this so that we can. We had June, July, and then we have the update coming up for update 2. So try and keep this up to date so you can always forecast when you want to see what's going on. A little bit of housekeeping. Log into the YouTube chat to join the conversation, ask questions, provide answers. It's a good interchange. It's a community. We want this to be your community so that you can ask questions to your peers and us, and we'll do our best to get you those answers. You can put an @ in front of the name, and it'll direct message and highlight that person for that particular conversation. So feel free to do that, and it kind of gives them a little prompt. Subscribe and put notifications, put comments into the recordings. We watch those. We want to make sure that we answer your questions. So if you have some questions afterwards, or if you're watching the recording, feel free to put in the comments there. And of course, if you like it, put a like out there. That always helps. Here's a link to this presentation. So I'm going to actually grab that. Here's a link to this presentation. It's out on my filer. I'm going to put it in chat down here so that it's there. You can grab that now and follow along, or you can grab it if you're in the watching the recording. We're also going to talk about how ZCM deals with disasters. I also have that link. I thought I put it in here. I guess I didn't. It will also, all of these links will be in the recording comments, okay, down below after we finalize this recording. And then past sessions and recordings are viewable here, as I mentioned. Also, if you want your quality the best, a 720p 60 is set, and then of course autoplay in case you get it gets interrupted. It doesn't go to some other channel or something. And you can do that all from the gear down at the bottom. Here's our current schedule. You can see we have Moises on October 5th for a live demo of ZCM Imaging WinPE Part 2. But we do have a couple of presentations today to show you, as well as the added bonus of disasters. That's not really a bonus, is it? But it's a good topic to discuss. So Micro Focus Customer Portal, be sure to log in before you actually need it. The reason why I say that is you don't want to be in the middle of a disaster or downtime when you can't get to those needed resources. So go in there. We've changed it all up. So what you're used to a year ago is not there. Make sure you can get in and get to your licenses, and you kind of navigate around. There's some videos down at the bottom here that you can go through, so that it kind of helps you with the tutorials and stuff, and talks about the different parts of the portal for you. But please do that. If you have any discrepancies, please email these email addresses here, and they'll get to you and address your issues so that everything's good. That way, if you do have to go to the portal for an emergency, you're good and you can get what you need. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the product. ZCM Suite, we're in Update 1 officially. Update 2 is right there. Update 2 is going to ops, so it can be finalized and released. Everything's complete on it. We had the Lighthouse. It's basically over and been working in production for some customers. And so we really appreciate those that were able to do the Lighthouse, because that allows us to see a production part of it, how you use it daily, and fix any issues that might come up that we missed. ZCM 2017 extended support expired this year, April 30th, so be aware of that. So you want to get on 2020 as soon as possible. Again, the current version is 2020 Update 1. There is a TID out there where you can download the ZDC, the agent cleanup, those types of things. The PRU is July 2021. August should be released anytime now. So you can go out there and get that either from your ZCC or from the SLD portal. And then we have, remember, the extended support 2017. Yeah, that's a duplicate. I got to take that off there. And then ZCM Mobile. There was an issue with Apple VPP. You probably already run into it and taken care of that. I just wanted to leave this on here one more time. So if you needed to get to that issue, this is a workaround. It's lengthy, but Apple changed something on their end, so we had to do some adjustments. But this TID takes care of it, or you can call us to help. Again, the driver update was May 2021, imaging driver update. You can get that from the SLD. Download links for that are these here if you need to get to it, as well as the MD checksums, okay, and what platforms they work on. There was no change for the Tuxera. That's pretty much it has been the same. But there's the information there for any imaging driver downloads if you're doing the imaging. OWS Suite, again, you can get the complement. OWS Suite comes with some ZENworks bundle of products, but if you want the complement of the rest of it, there is an add-on that you could purchase. And this started about a year ago. That way you can actually get the full, if you want full disk encryption and asset management. It's just an add-on to your the cost of the OWS Suite. And then Admin Studio 2021, I noticed it was out there. So be aware it's out there. I also was able to license it with a previous license. So don't panic if you don't see the current 2021 license. Try the other license and you should be able to function with that. It has some new stuff in it, which is really, really nice. We need to go over that with the ZENcast as well. Desktop containers. Current version is 21.3. I think 21.7 might have been out. And the dot is the month, in case you weren't sure. And obviously 21 is the year. So as you see these numbers, that's what they represent. Again, they did a lot of work on 21.3 with learning tools and being able to use it with other platforms, Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle. So they've been really tying things in. You can simplify remote learning with desktop. There's a couple of articles out there, one at the community being able to simplify remote learning with desktop containers and application streaming. Good article. There's a couple other things about a presentation we did here on ZENcast, in case you wanted to review that Jason's presentation. And then the actual ZENcast live is out there as well. 21.7 should be released soon. It might even be 21.8 by that time. But we're trying to dovetail Filer, and they already have Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox integrated, and now we're working on Filer. So be aware that you can actually integrate those other components of the Micro Focus products into this to make it easier for you. Okay, ZAM. We have Assistant Director in Education Experience Quality, Premium Quality Asset Management Tool. So great reviews from you, the customers, about the products that we have. So there's a few articles in here that come to light, and I'm really excited about sharing those with you. That was last October. I think I've shared this a couple times, but we're going to get to some other articles as well. And I'm excited about some of the surveys that you guys did. So we'll get to that in a minute. ZMM, ZENworks Mobile Management, the legacy, not ZCM Mobile, but ZMM, ended last year, December 31st. Part of that was a Java thing. You know, Java's going away, or the, not the Java going away, the components that ZMM used went away in the browsers, and I'm just having a moment here. But anyway, because that was going away, we had dovetailed that to be ended support at that time as well, and December 31st. And so make sure you get on to ZCM Mobile, and we can help you with that as well. Patch Tuesday highlights. July's out there, and you can go to August. Should be out about mid-month, when, you know, after Patch Tuesday we go through. It's a really good article. I think you go, there it is. There's June. I know July was out here. Look for July. But anyway, if we went to June, you could see that it actually has things about the updates that you may need to feel important in case you're doing updates for particular platforms and other areas. So it's a good article that they update monthly. Also, patch management to manage updates, Microsoft Edge. So Microsoft Edge really isn't a product you install, right? It's in the OS. So because of that, they really don't. It doesn't have patches in a way that ZENworks can download. So this is a way you can patch that and manage the Edge browsers that you're using in your environment. And then the ZENworks Patch Management course 250 is out there for those that want to take the patch management course. ZRS 7.2 is the latest version there. ZRS 7.8 will be released with update 2. All right. Service Desk 8.2.1 was released back in May or earlier. Appliance online update security patches. Remember, August is coming up. August is here already. Double check those channels so that you get the latest security updates. They do it every 3 months, and August is the next one. Also, what's new is here. Yeah, it was released in April. What's new is here. It's Flash. Thanks, Kurt. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I just had a moment there. Flash is going away. So with that, ZMM was using Flash, and so we had to discontinue that product. And of course, ZCM Mobile has been out there for a while, so it's matured. ZSD in your preferred language. So there's a few articles out there about ZSD. One is put ZSD in your preferred language. So we have Vibo out there that he's a developer, one of our lead developers, and he put an article out here so that you can look into that and see how to do that. So We even have developers out on the community helping out. We do have the ZSD customization cookbook. This has scenarios and different customizations if you're setting logging, if you want to change colors, branding scenarios, system configurations. It basically ties other TIDs together. So this is a helpful document, so you don't have to memorize all the other documents. Bookmark this one, and we keep this updated. And then there's an upgrade tutorial, upgrade cookbook, and for ZSD, and we keep these updated so it makes it easier for you to understand, remember the reminders and things to do on your system in your environment to be able to do the upgrade successfully. And then Connected MX, the documentation is out there as well. And we had a presentation from Ed Gavin last week, which was a great presentation, showed us some things we can do with Connected and how you can, that ransomware and those types of things, how it can get nasty. But the documentation link is there, so you can look into that. Great product. It's really making good headway as far as it really helps the end user, right? A shout out again for filer drop-in. Robin Redgrave does a filer drop-in regularly, once a month. You can add those to your iCal and Outlook calendars. There is a filer technical webinar that happened in June. If you click on this and you sign in, it'll take you right to the recording. So look at that if you're interested in the filer. It has some great information in it. Partner page, training pre-sale certification. So double check that link and see. Oh, I may have the wrong link in there. Check for the L300, and then there's also a course 320 coming soon. And then SE Corners, 5 killers of your data security. So we had some SE systems engineers that help us with pre-sales and post-sales and demonstrations, Bob and Todd, and they did a presentation on 5 killers of your data security and how to fix them. So pretty comprehensive, which is nice. Events and recordings, again, TTP USA. You know about the customer ideas. You know about ZENcast Live. What's new webinar for U2. We've had a couple of those, provisioning and managed via autopilot. Also, the Micro Focus Realize that we had for Asia Pac in May. There's some on-demand sessions you can go to and recordings you can go to there. Recent articles, success story. We have a customer called Meyer, and they're a grocery outlet, and how they took on ZENworks and have just taken it to a whole nother level with their point of sale devices and so forth, and what they do. So this is a real good overview of what they're doing and how they were successful using ZENworks. And then also Peer Insights Review. This is where I want to thank everybody out there that filled these out, gave their review, honest reviews. We got some overall raging reviews about ZENworks, and got some high marks in so it's getting recognition, which is really great. Just want to send our appreciations to you as a customer that hopefully we're doing the right thing and you're getting what you need out of the product so that we can all be successful. And then I think I already did the ZAM Premium Quality Asset Tool, which was an article. Also on Peer Insights from Gartner, okay, and how one customer used it. Open Horizons articles from product managers, primarily from ZCM 2020 Update 2 about modern management of Windows 10 and endpoint security anti-malware. And again, this is the recognition. I just wanted to say we got recognized as a major player for unified endpoint management, and some of the things that customers have said. The survey results are here. And we got great ratings. I mean, you guys are very generous on what we had. In this particular ratings, there was 4, and there's more. So thank you so much for putting us in the limelight there. ZENworks community obviously moved. The community get started is this page here, and we talked about ZSD in your preferred language, which was a community post, as well as improved ticket handling with ZSD 821 is also an article out there. So recap a little bit. Connected MX, global presentation on the product and capabilities, demonstration from administrator's point of view and the user side. So Gavin did a great job on representing Connected MX, and I appreciate that he was able to take his time and show us that great product. So we're going to get into today's agenda. Moises couldn't make it. He apologizes, but we have a couple of videos that I'll go ahead and narrate as we go through it. Two of the most common questions is how to enable WinPE for PXE Imaging and how to create a WinPE bootcd. So he went through this and sent me two videos of how he shows customers how to do this, and then we'll cover those, and then we'll get right into how ZCM handles disasters. Okay, and that presentation, which I can grab here, it's going to take us. Let's go here. See, and this is the handles. So that's how ZCM handles presentation handles disasters. Okay, so let's get into how to enable WinPE for PXE Imaging. Okay, yeah. Let me move this over.
This is a demo on how to enable the, WinPE on your ZENworks configuration management zone.
I'm trying to get it bigger. Let's see if I can get it bigger.
So we first start by actually searching for the ADK. This is the Microsoft Assessment and Deployment Kit.
You hear that okay?
We simply search for ADK download. It's usually the first entry in the search.
No, didn't want that. Full screen. Sorry about
The
that.
ADK.
Hang on one sec. Start it up again. Minimize
This
this.
is a demo on how to enable the, WinPE on your ZENworks configuration management zone. So we first start by actually searching for the ADK. This is the Microsoft Assessment and Deployment Kit. We simply search for ADK download. It's usually the first entry in the search. The ADK is actually has two components. The ADK itself, which is a pre-boot environment tools or deployment tools, and we're going to go ahead and install this component first. I usually uncheck the other accessories that come with the ADK, so I just leave the deployment tools, which is what we need for this.
So he's installing the ADK and then the add-on.
Once this component is installed, we need to install the second component, which is the WinPE OS. So we'll go ahead and do that. In the past, there used to be only one component, but now since the last year or two, they break it up into two components. So this is now I'm installing the WinPE component, the second component. Okay, now that these two components from the ADK are installed, we'll go ahead and continue by uploading these components into ZENworks, into your ZENworks server by invoking the web console. This part is very important. We actually need to run the browser as administrator. The ZCC or the web console has a plugin that needs access to your hard drives to be able to access the files from the ADK. So that's what we need. That's why we need to run the browser as administrator. This is just for this operation. Usually it's not a good idea to run a browser as administrator, but for this operation only, that is needed. So we'll go to the configuration settings under device management, and then after pre-boot services. In here you'll see a third-party imaging settings section, and this is where we are gonna upload the WinPE components. The first time you actually click on the magnifier glass, it will try to invoke this plugin that I was talking about, but since it is not installed, you actually need to install it the first time you access this setting. So it's an MSI, and just download it from the link and install it.
As you know, each version of ZENworks has its version of the ZCC helper. So if you've done an upgrade in between, you've probably seen this before, where you need to upgrade to the latest ZCC helper for compatibility in that zone version.
At this point, it's a good idea to close the browser and then restart it in order for the browser to be able to detect the plugin just installed. So again, as I mentioned before, this is important. You need to start the browser as administrator. Going back to the third-party imaging settings section, we'll go ahead and do the upload. You're prompted to open the plugin, which is the ZCC helper, and then you get here an option to choose the WIM file. Since this section is for the 32-bit, you have to ensure that the WIM file that you're going to be choosing is for 32 bits. So the ADK includes WinPE for 32 and 64 bits. So under pre-installation environment, and then WinPE.wim. And make sure it's x86, which is 32 bits. We click upload. Usually this part takes several minutes, so you have to be a little patient on that one. Now the next one is the image X. This is a Microsoft tool to be able to create and restore images. So if you plan to make WinPE images, then you will need this to be uploaded as well. The path is a little different, is under deployment tools. And then you choose for x86, which is 32 bits. Now we're going to do the 64 bits component, so it's the same thing. You just need to ensure that you are choosing the WIM file, the WinPE WIM file for 64 bits, and the image X for 64 bits as well. Yeah, so for 64 bits it's AMD 64. Now we do the corresponding image X for 64 bits. Also make sure that at the bottom of the page you click apply and then OK. And then after a few minutes, these components will be copied to the TFTP folder on your primary server.
And that concludes that particular part of the presentation on how to enable WinPE for PXE Imaging. We'll move right into how to create WinPE bootcd.
This is a demo on how to create a ZENworks WinPE ISO. On this machine where we're going to create the ISO, we first need to download and install the ADK, the Microsoft Assessment and Deployment Kit. The ADK is actually made of two components. The first one is the ADK itself, which is the deployment tools, and the second one is the WinPE OS. So those two components need to be installed. Another requirement is that on this machine I need to have the CCC helper plugin installed. So you can do that by going to the ZENworks setup page under administrator tools, and you see the MSI for the CCC helper. So go ahead and download it and install it on this machine. Another thing that we will need for the creation of WinPE bootcd is we need to copy a folder from the primary server. This folder is under op novel ZENworks share Tomcat web apps ZENworks ext, and the folder is called 3PI utils. So I'm just going to go copy this into my user folder on my Windows machine. One thing that we can do, this is optional, but it's a good idea to do this. We can actually configure the IP address of your imaging server. So we go to 3PI utils folder under x8664, and we specify, and we open the file send settings ini, and we specify the IP address of our imaging server. Another thing we can do is if we intend to do to create and restore WinPE images, so you will need the Microsoft deployment tool utility, which is the ImageX, and this is installed there in the NDK as shown in here. So just find for 64 bits is the ImageX exe. We copy that file into our 3PI utils x8664 folder. This is just in case if you want to make create and restore WinPE images. Now we need to open a command prompt, and we need to ensure that it is open or it runs as administrator. Now we need to go to the folder where the CCC helper was installed. CCC helper is installed under the user and under the hidden folder app data. So it's under roaming, Novell ZENworks, CCC helper, bin folder. In there you see the utility, which is called the WinPE processor exe. So we need to execute this utility with some parameters that I'm specifying here, which is make ISO AMD 64, which is the architecture for of the bootcd that we're going to create, and then we provide the path where the 3PI utils folder is, and we have to ensure that it's a 64-bit under 64-bit since we are creating a 64-bit bootcd. So we run this command as shown in the screen. This usually takes several minutes to finish and to create the bootcd and then get back to the prompt. When it finishes, it gives you the path where the ISO was saved. So it's pretty much, it will create an ISO folder under the folder we were working on. So we'll go ahead and go up to that folder to check the ISO file. So app data, as mentioned before, is a hidden folder. So you may not see it if you don't have your view properties correctly in Windows File Explorer. So under bin, and then that's the folder that was created, and that is the ISO. the WinPE ISO.
And there we have it. And the crowd goes crazy. So yeah, I think it's Jose over at CIS Tax said that there was some information out at the community site. Let's see if we can find what he's referring to. There might be some more details on imaging. Endpoint, we'll go to ZENworks. It'll be ZENworks configuration. I don't think they have a separate one for imaging. Let's go to configuration management. Let me do full screen here. See if we can find. Let's go. It is also in the documentation, Kurt. Yes, and I also documented it, the steps in the slides here, and we'll see those in a minute. No, we don't want. Maybe it's discussions or tips. There's discussions. Probably more so under tips. It sounds like. Let me see a few. I don't see it, but seems like there's some MDT and related stuff out here mentioned. So be sure to go ahead and search out here. So put it under a different blog or something. I don't see it. What I'll do is I'll dig through it after. Let's go here. See if we can find MDT. Shouldn't be too many things. MDT. 17.4. Moises did say that there was an older video out there, and this is just brings it up to date to show you that, like he said, they split off those files. These look like they're 17.3. Let's go WinPE. That's it. Okay. Don't see it yet, and it's just a matter of trying to find out where that is. But I'll dig it out. I'll look a little bit more and try and dig it out for later, and put it in the recording under comments. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Always helpful to have extra tips, and just remember that this community is here, and even if it's not listed and you're having an issue, go ahead and post uh, in the discussion area, and you'll get people responding. Okay, so use this as a tool. Also, you can see that other questions are here, so feel free to use those. Okay. And as I mentioned, yeah, Kurt, it is in the documentation. You'll find that I have a list of documentation at the end of this, as well as if we look right after, here's the steps he took in written form. So that's the one. That's the second for the WinPE bootcd ISO, and that's what he took in the video. In the meantime, um, I have some documentations out there as well. So I hope that's helpful to anybody trying to get into this or needing some additional resources. There is those there. Even at advanced, this is an older course, 9315, but it still pretty much applies if you're diving into it. It gives you some great details. So don't disclude it, even if it's old. It should give you some great stuff. Okay, in the meantime, since I knew it was going to be cut short, I thought I would go ahead and do another presentation on how ZCM handles disasters. So part of this is we had a customer that wanted to do a disaster recovery site, and we had some sit-down conversations with them, and some of those conversations were something as simple as, why do you want this site, right? What is your reason to have a DR site instead of, because they hadn't had ZENworks yet, so they didn't even have ZENworks. They're saying everybody has a DR site, so I must need one, right? So that started prompting us. Yes, there are reasons to have a DR site itself, and we do have customers that do a DR site. Most of them don't, because there's a lot of ways that ZCM handles disasters. There's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of um, just backups or dual processes that help out, right? That take over if needed. So that I put together this presentation for them, and then realized that this might be valuable to other people as well. So I honed it and actually changed it up a little bit so that it's more presentable to just about any environment. Okay, so we're going to go through these, and if you have any questions, feel free to shout them out. But for the most part, this was a presentation I actually presented at the TTP conference. So if you were at the TTP conference in my session, it'll be a repeat of that. But I think we have a different community here that may not have been at the TTP conference, and I thought it would be good to record this. So we're going to go ahead and give it a go and share with you on how ZCM handles disasters. We're going to cover a few things: basics of ZCM disaster recovery. We're going to talk about the closest server rules, some roles and services, schedules. I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of schedules in ZCC, and they can all be configured, or just let uh, the system take care of them. So you can do either or. Preparation and maintenance documentation, zone documentation, why you should have them, what you should put together, understand the customer environment, zones revisited. So we're going to go through some disaster scenarios. So let's go ahead and get through this. There's a lot of information here. I hope it's more of a reference than going through it bit by bit. But ZCM built-in disaster recovery protection through redundancy, communication failover, high availability fault tolerance, database vendor clustering if you needed to do the database cluster, because the one single point of failure is that database, right? So, and there are things you can do with that database to be able to make it more robust, and one of them is clustering, right? There's Zookeeper cluster. Again, only if you have only on appliances, and only if you need it for the Vertica. Okay. Some of the components for quick automating recovery, of course, your backups. Make sure you get a server backup, a database backup, CA certs, and other uh, screenshots are great as well. Okay. Scripts and documentation, roles about the environment, are the roles that servers have, the environment, and I'll show you some examples of how you can format this to put it all in a small binder or something, or on a page for access. Remember, there's caching on local drives. So if a primary server is down, or if your zone is down, your device isn't necessarily down, the communication is, and it does have some cache. Preset firewall and routing restrictions. Some of the manual tasks in a disaster would obviously be prop up that other VM, restore the backups or snapshots to new location. You have the vendor database mirroring tasks, or the clustering that you might have to do. Manually reconfiguring primaries to the new database, if you had to do so. Reconfiguring routing. And again, the documentation has these specifically for if you're changing the IP on a primary server, or if you're changing DNS names. So this is in the documentation. Again, this is more of talking about disaster and trying to see if you actually need a disaster site or not. You can enable Zookeeper on a DR primary as well, or when you do Zookeeper, you want to make sure, and I think I cover this later, you have it in, if you're clustering it, you're going to put it in threes, not twos. And they only go on appliances. And of course, that's going to be larger sites. Concerns using a standby DR site, access to backup data and restore devices with identity, right? You want to make sure you got the right identity. Scripting some of the manual process, you might want to script that. Added expense. You may have to go layer 4 switches, routers, infrastructure. There's some added expense in there as well to make sure that you have, as the second bullet down says, high speed or no or low latency bandwidth, right? DR database, separate database altogether, would be in read-only mode with certain things turned on and off. So the disaster recovery site would have some special things in it, and of course it has to be tested to make sure your routing is correct, um, make sure it gets its content replication and so forth. Okay. And again, you know about the primary server services. You have service monitor, server loader, collection, configuration, authentication, so forth. But you also have additional services like embedded PostgreSQL, join proxy, pre-boot services if you're doing imaging, TFTP. You can actually, and the documentation actually covers configuring a primary server, this bottom bullet here, configuring a primary server for just being a ZCC server, or just being, if it's in the DMZ, what do you turn on and off, or just an inventory collection server. So that way, if you have multiple primaries and you want the duties just to be for one particular box, so it doesn't overwhelm other primaries, you can do that. Again, the roles that are available for the zone's first primary server, it could be an appliance or it can be an OS, right? If it's an appliance, you could put Vertica and Zookeeper on it, right? And only if it's applicable. On the larger organizations, when you're trying to get performance out of it, you might want to prop up Vertica database so that you could get better performance. And then you also have a database either on the first primary server or an external. And then you have the things like the cert auth, the master primary, the device cert, all the different roles for that primary server, which really match up with any additional primary servers coming in from the handheld access point down, right? And you've seen that probably in your configuration. The few things, so you want to make sure on your first primary server is these obviously aren't on other servers, so you want to back those things up. Now the master primary isn't so important anymore. It's been back in 11 days when they had that, but there's obviously the documentation tells you how to move them and so forth, and the ZCC will move your cert. So there's the documentation gives you those. And then of course satellite servers are an extension of the primary servers just with these components, right? They don't do configuration, and because those only come from primary. Some dedicated server roles, and again, this is just a summary. Some server roles are system updates, messaging, telemetry, assigning optimization. You have, a ZAM license info server, active sync. So you have servers that can be dedicated just to do patch. You're right, Kurt. The Vertica is mainly for performance with patch and CVE feature, and normally for larger organizations. So thank you for clarifying that. And so that way you can get, it takes the load off of your primary server and database because it takes that processes. Thank you. So you have these other server roles that can be dedicated. You can dedicate a particular one just for zone sharing, right? Or server certificates and so forth. So be aware that these roles exist because it's important to know where they sit, right? Zone server schedules, we're used to knowing about the user and device login, the device refresh, bundle policies, deliveries, you do it now, do it on login, do it on logout, whatever. You have patch policies, you have primary replication going on, satellite replication going on, and imaging on top of that. So does your satellite do imaging? Does it do go to the primary? You have all these server schedules, but then you have all these other schedules that you can configure. If you don't configure these, it'll automatically, the system will pick it up and the servers will talk to each other and work it through. But be aware that you can configure certain schedules, certain servers for these schedules. Okay. Automatic message cleanup, when do you do it? refresh, Zeus refresh, Intune app policy syncs, and so forth. So those server schedules are in there, typically in the ZCC under configuration, right? Just finding which component it goes to as far as in the list. So under zone preparation, maintenance, and documentation, we're going to talk a little bit about documentation, product zone information, backup zone details, and then production environment information. So some of the things you want to remember, there's database servers, right? You have the ZENworks database, and you have the audit database, which is typically on every ZENworks zone. But don't forget that if you have a Vertica database and you have Zookeeper and Kafka that you have to be concerned about as well. Okay, so there are multiple databases, and then the primary servers. You have primary server roles, dedicated server roles. You have primary server functions, right? Which typically marry to the roles. Okay. And then you have the backup details and schedules for primary servers, for database servers. Know when these things expire, like the certificates and stuff. Database connection files, I put them in here just so that you can remember that those are the ones that connect to the database. They have the authentication encrypted files for being able to communicate with the database. So if you're moving your primary server or your database and they need to communicate to a different server or database, be sure to look at these particular files. And again, this is all documented. Production environment information, contact information, in-house admins and vendors. So be sure to have some of that information listed. The worst thing is, I remember when I was at my previous employer, we were doing an upgrade and we didn't have our DBA's phone number handy. And so I had to call my boss to get it because we were having some connection issues to our Oracle. So have those in a spot, at least get them prepared, get that stuff prepared if you're doing an upgrade so that you have them readily available. And then routing configurations, being able to make sure that you don't have any routing configurations. I had a customer the other day that as soon as we upgraded a product, it would no longer connect to the portal. And it was like, what's going on? Well, it happened to be the SSL inspection that they were running in the background. It was discarding everything. So we had to make some adjustments. So understanding those things about your environment as well. Okay. Example, customer environment documentation. So this is just an example how you can, which products do you have, which products are integrated, right? You want to make sure they're still working after you do your upgrade, or you have your downtime or your disaster. Each primary server, make sure, you have whether it's physical or virtual, what platform it's on, the IP, the dedicated disk space, and so forth. Because if you document this with the disk space and you see it growing over time and you redocument it after an upgrade, then you could see, oh, there's a difference here when you go back to update that documentation. Satellite servers as well, same with the databases and instance names and disk space available free. LDAP user source, right? And the user source name to authenticate into, the IP and the port, LDAP authentication username that you're using as well, not just a user source name. And then your certificates expirations, MDM expirations, and then just it's nice to know what the growth or decrease of your managed devices are. So kind of keep a tally of that and the number of locations, right? And then most of all, make sure you update that, right? And you put a date on it. Then the next time you have this sheet and you fill it out, most of it will be the same, but then you could see the differences here. All right. This may be an example of a visual design for a network design. You have your primary higher speeds up here. You have 1 gigabits, 100 megabits, but then you have your slower speeds. Why is this handy? well, if you're having an issue with this particular primary, well, this is a satellite over here, then it still may be a link, right? Or you need to throttle or do some put content over on the satellite instead of just having it as an authentication or whatever, right? So this is a visual representation of how you can look at your network design, which is good as far as visually, but then again, you update it, last updated, then this is more of a documentation, okay? You have your location, you have your site, your server, your IP, gives all the details, what the roles are for the services, are they dedicated, how many users and workstations on each one are in the zone, and then the ports. Again, ports, if you've changed from to customized ports, you want to make sure that you have those details in here so that you can understand that a little bit better. And then on your outside, like the orange, we had that other group of UK and India. You have your other devices, right? You have your satellites, you have your domain controllers and so forth. Tallies up down here what your workstations and mobiles are, those types of things. Okay. Um, Good to have your domain name and your short name and just some small details in there in case you have variables. Okay. And then again, update it, right? When was it last updated and how did it change? So that's kind of some documentation tips. And now we're going to get into closest server rules. Um, Closest zone, closest. Again, this presentation was for somebody who knew what ZENworks did, but didn't know how it did it. So being able to describe where these different components fit in for what they were trying to do, and whether or not you need a disaster recovery site. Okay. So Zen closest server rules, we have two in the zone here. You can see two primary servers. And you can adjust these primary servers and satellites, parent childs. This one doesn't have a child, but in this case, you can see that it has the different services. Okay. And you notice that this has P2 on top and then it has it on the bottom. So we're balancing things out depending on what component we're using or what service we're trying to use for that particular primary server. Okay, and you can also do that with satellites. Um, and then you go over to locations where you can do pretty much the same thing. You could put devices or primary servers for particular locations as well, primary and satellites. Okay, so you'd go to ZCC configuration and then locations, and you could start setting up your locations so that you have that slow link to India. You can set, if I'm in this IP, I'm in the slow link, I'm throttling, I'm doing content replication over there in the evening, so I have that schedule, those types of things. Okay, and then you have your network environments down here. So they're both, these two are married if you want to marry them. All right. Closest servers on the managed device would show like this. This is from a customer. He has a satellite. So this is a remote location where this particular managed device talks to a satellite first, and then we'll go to the ZCM primaries for its collection, right? Configuration doesn't have satellites can't do configuration, so it goes directly to the ZCM server, primary server. And when a managed device talks, it talks top down. So the first thing it's going to do is look for the satellite, communicate, do what it needs to do. If it doesn't find the satellite, it's going to go to the next thing in the list, which is the ZCM primary server, and then patch. So if the satellite happens to be down, you're not down. It basically, if you have this configured correctly, it will then go to the next device. Okay, and we'll cover scenarios in how it recovers that way in a minute. Oh, we're going to do that right now. We're just going to talk about an evolving zone diagram with an internal database right now. So you start out with the primary server, you have a Postgres internal database, you have some test devices. So you're throwing it up, you're kicking the tires, you're trying to figure out what does this ZENworks do, Okay, I can start testing devices. I can create some bundles and stuff. Let's go ahead and get some content from the ZENworks repository, and this could be patches, this could be system updates, and those types of things, licensing, appliance, online updates, those different things. We have a legend down here that talks a little bit about, some subscription and patch, some database communications, ZENworks zone communications with these different colors. Okay, this particular customer had needed an air gapped zone. So you'll see a little bit of air gap zones in here as well, and that's what this orange is, the communication for that. But for the most part, this can go across the board for most zones as far as this evolution, right? You got the LDAP server that comes in. You start building in more devices. You're talking to more devices. You realize I need to get another primary server in there or two. So these guys talk. Everybody talks to the zone, and depending on their configuration, they talk to their primary server, right? So this basically is the zone there with additional primary servers, and it has an internal database. Then you can set up your locations. Location 1, location 2, and off you go. You now can separate some traffic and be able to minimize impact on the wire by doing locations and also for troubleshooting. Okay. So the customer presented me with this particular environment that they were setting up. They had a MSSQL database server with two primaries. They have a gap, right? An air gap zone. This is the air gap zone on the left. On the right is talking to the ZENworks repository. We had to bring in a few other things here into this. One, so we decided to put in a legend, right? So you can tell what are primary servers, air gap zones, so forth. Okay. Um, but then they didn't realize that they needed to have representation of what's in here for patches in this zone so the air gap collector can collect them. So we did that over here. We did an MSSQL server external, right? It's part of the zone, but it may be doing other things too. So it's not in the managed zone. You have your LDAP server, and you have your representation of what's going to be in the air gap zone. Okay. We're going to talk to the repository, so I redesigned um, their diagram with this one here. And so then we have an air gap zone. And then finally we have the communication for the manual patch transfer, file transfer, so that we can patch on the left. Okay, makes sense? Hopefully that stepped through it fairly easily. They decided to have MSSQL. It could be any external server. Just know that the communication's going in these directions. This is your zone. This is your zone. You'd have two zones in an air gap. Okay. Um, so this is a diagram with an external database, just like we saw, but just a basic zone. Okay. We took their air gap zone and we moved it into one page. Okay, so here it is in one page. Here's our patch transfer. We got satellite servers, we got primary servers, and so forth. So they're doing ZCM and ZPM in this air gapped zone. Okay. Um, so we did discuss clustering the database, so for high availability, and that was good. So that's one thing that we can do. You use the vendor's clustering, right? So if you're doing any recovery off of that database, you obviously have to follow their documentation. Um, and so the zone would still contain these items here that the managed devices would be talking to. We then talked about locations and how they can leverage locations in the zone. We have the zone, and then we have locations. Now remember, you can, even though it says air gap zone, you can take that away and just have your regular zone and put in, the ZENworks repository, and this is just another view of the same thing, right? Except you don't have an air gap zone. All right. So this is kind of just shows some zone diagrams. We're going to get into scenarios now, I believe, so that we can see what happens. Again, disclaimer, ZCM can be configured in so many ways. These scenarios cover general architecture of a zone. Please refer to the documentation for more specifics in relation to your zone. Okay, so just want to make sure you don't take this as gospel. This is basically drawn out from experience and what we've seen so that we can answer some general questions. We're going to look at a disaster recovery scenario number one, a loss collector zone. Okay, so in this case, we are air gap zone. We're going to lose our collector zone, right? This will continue to stay running, and this is some of the things that we discussed in our conversation with the customer. Is this your people are not down? They just won't get patches, right? They could still talk to their primary servers. The database is up and running, and so forth. Okay, but we've lost our collector zone. So what do we need to do? We need to create another MSSQL, prop up another SQL server, another primary server. We're going to restore the roles and search for the collector zone, right? Make sure our firewall and routing access is working. Restart the live primary. And when I say zone, that means we got a data center issue. I mean, if you have more than one server out, we might have some bigger issues, right? So anyway, that zone, we'd recover both of those servers, and we'd reroute to the ZENworks repository. Of course, if you keep the same identity and it's in the same IP scheme or subnet, you're really okay. You're just recovering, right? Um, and then live primaries successfully authenticate to the database in LDAP. Just make sure that that occurs. Second one is DR site number 2, lost internal database. So we had an external database with clusters, even on the air gap zone or on the air gap collector. Here we have an internal database, and we're going to lose this guy. Well, what do we need to do? We need to basically reroute our patches to another primary server, and we're going to need to restore this server either itself or in another fashion. So basically, you're doing a restore on this. In the meantime, if you didn't have air gapped, it would look similar to this, right? There's your zone, and you're going to lose this guy. Well, what you need to do is you need to basically restore the database, whether it's on the internal or even if you have an external, restore the database, because that's going to be a single point of failure in a appliance with the internal database type architecture. Depending on the primary config, some or all actions will continue, right? So database is down. We'll have a little bit slower login impact. ZA login is impacted, but they have cache, okay? And once we recover this database, we obviously want to restart the primaries. One thing to be sure of, okay? But you do need your role certs and services adjusted in case you prop up another. You move it then to MSSQL right from there, or whatever, depending on your actions there. So then disaster recovery number 3, lost external database. So we have an external database. It happens to be MSSQL. We happen in, whether it's air gapped or not, we have our zone and we lose our MSSQL server. Same type of thing. We're going to need to recover that SQL server somehow and reroute our devices to point to that once it's restored. And so it's pretty similar to the internal database. Now, if you had clustering, that's a different story. You could obviously turn on the clustering. I can't remember if I have a scenario like that. We'll see. Okay. Oh, I put that on here. Database failover using vendor tools. So if you do have clustering, you just use the database failover using the vendor tools for the external databases. Okay. And here we do have clustering. In this case, we're going to lose a primary server. Okay. And so with the zone, we lose a primary server, everything's running fine. Okay. You may have to adjust certs and roles depending on what this primary server has on it. But remember, we have that documentation telling us it has these particular roles, it has these particular, maybe the certs or those types of things. So that's where the documentation really comes in handy. Whether this is air gapped or not, it will uh, be the same way. Everything's still running and functioning. We just need to recover this particular primary while you're doing that. Okay? And then scenario number 5, lost primary server location 2. So that was location 1, right? We're going to lose it in location 2. Same thing. Depending on our configuration, whether we're air gapped or not, the devices here that are in location 2 should have these two devices also configured in their collection and configuration and so forth. So that way they just function. Okay. It should not impact anything but recovering this particular primary server. Okay, and then of course if you're not air gapped, the same thing. Number 6, disaster recovery, lost location 1, communication. So not only can we, maybe we just got a switch down or a router down. Okay, so let's go to our external server. We got 3 primary servers, and oh no, we have clustering, and we lost communication, right? We didn't necessarily lose the servers, but these devices can't talk to these devices. Okay, so it's more of a communication issue. A switch is down, so you're going to have to do some recovery. Whoops, do some recovery there. Zone stays running because you have this primary still talking to the database, right? These are still talking to the database, though they can't communicate to these devices. So you're going to notice that there's a consistency of certain location 1 not communicating, location 2 is communicating, and that these primaries are up and running. Then obviously it's the in between, which is the pipeline, right? And so we have cluster. We lost communication here. This is another one. This should be 8 actually. So we actually lost this zone. Okay, we lost these both primaries. You should still be able to, if this location has this primary server configured as the last one to talk to, or in the list somewhere, these devices will still be maintained and be able to work. And this is more of a communication with maybe the NICs are bad on this, or you have one primary and the NIC's bad. Okay, so you start troubleshooting at that angle. Again, having that documentation, you can easily whittle down, seeing what's going on and what's not going on. And here's 8, lost location 1, site servers. So we have our zone, and we just lost a chunk. So the data center's down. I mean, we had, I remember at my last location, we had an outage, and it was because somebody hit the telephone pole, right? And so we had no power. We were on backup. We lost the data center. But over where we had the police department and other things, other primaries, they were still functioning. These devices, well, they were functioning partially, right? Because we had to prop up, you either have to prop up another site, right? Which is identity of zone server and database minimal, so that you can start talking again to the database through this primary, because you do have one primary live. So a disaster recovery site, if you had one, you might want to prop it up over here if this is down for an extended period of time, so that you can communicate. But the zone, as long as they're configured, these guys are configured, you should be able to talk to this primary If it has a database connected, you should be okay while you do some recovery. So you basically prop up another server, MS SQL server with that VM or physical. Manage the device, use local cache, limited live primary communication until you start recovering that database. Okay, and again, you have things like live primary successfully authenticate to database and LDAP. So can this guy still authenticate to the LDAP server? Can the zone? So you basically reconfigure this as a DR site. And then some disaster recovery put to use, right? So here's some things: recovery and matching the identity. What's things would you want to do? Of course, referring to the documentation for all of this, but in a nutshell, what roles did they have? What identity did they have? You need to recluster. If it was clustering, you have the vendor failover process, restart the active primary satellites in ZENworks services, and make sure everything's successful, talking not only to routing but to the other devices like LDAP. If you have ZRS communicating with it, or iPrint, or ZSD, be sure to have those. Just a couple of things on the troubleshooting with logs and queries. A couple of logs to look for, the databases and logs, satellites, and then the networking, doing traceroute, netstat, land trace, as you get further into it and find out where the root cause is, right? Then finally, I put out some things here. Here's the Micro Focus ZCM forums, technical support, system requirements, but you also have the best practices guide, the supported capabilities by platform, disaster recovery preparedness, which is a good one to review every so often. Location awareness, a little bit more about that. If you're using locations, if you're not using locations. ZENworks Vertica reference guide, if you happen to be doing more of the patch and CVE stuff. ZENworks TCP IP and UDP ports. Okay, and then I did throw in the MS SQL clustering ports and firewall settings, because this particular customer was using MS SQL. Okay, and again, make sure you refer to the documentation of that. But that is the presentation of what ZCM does when you go when it has a disaster. So you don't always need a DR site. You don't need a disaster recovery site. One thing I did want to preface is I'm going to go out to my zone. Let's see. Actually, I want to do this. Okay. Oh yeah, that's what I'm getting with. Maybe that's why I use this. Let's try this. Logging into my zone. Let me go full screen. I did upgrade to no, I didn't upgrade. This is 220.1. But one thing I wanted to make sure that you were aware of with the locations, and I don't know if this zone has multiples, but let's see if we can get there. We have some locations here and some network environments. See if we can open one up. When you go to servers, oh no, not this one. Hang on, let me go to locations. Test. So again, we showed you that slide where it had the collection servers, content servers, configuration, authentication, join proxy. This is a primary server, so it has all of those. When you have your list, right, you're going to add a particular server, and we'll use this primary. I only have one primary in here, so I apologize. But let's say you had two, okay, and maybe it's in the zone where we have two different locations, and I want my devices to talk to this device in this location first. and I don't configure the second one. Okay, especially when you get to configuration servers, because only primaries can do configurations for the devices, and that's things like refresh and where it's getting its getting its details from. Um, should I check this box, right? And I have other primary servers, but should I check this box, exclude the closest server default rule, and this server goes down, all those devices will not talk to anybody. Okay, so because you said I only want it to talk to this one only. Should you uncheck this, it not only talks to this set of servers, but it also goes and sets and talks to the default rules as well, which is this list. Okay, so just be careful with that exclude. You can pin yourself in a box, paint yourself in a corner by checking that exclude, and next thing you know, you won't have a way to get out of it. You'd have to go to, because the devices, until that server comes back up, those devices won't be able to get any more content. They'll run on cache, but they won't be able, if it's using for authentication, it's not going to authenticate into ZENworks. So be careful about that one checkbox. I think that's one to be concerned about. And I like to bring it up because I ran into that issue. Okay, at a previous employer, I had this checked in my testing lab. Not in network, it's in the locations. I had this checked in my lab, right? Well, my lab primary server went down, and I had a secondary server, but I didn't have it in this list. So I was, SOL until I got that server back up. Okay, and it has to be the same identity. Okay, you can't just prop up, change IPs, all of that, because whatever content or configuration that came down to that local managed device had a particular IP or DNS name, and if it's IP and you change the IP, then it won't know how to find it. Okay, so be aware of that particular checkbox. Don't be afraid of it. It's very handy. It really segregates and cordons off. It's good for security if you're trying to secure devices so they don't stray and go to other areas. But just be aware to have a backup. Have at least two in this location. So that's what I have for you today. I hope it was beneficial. I hope you are able to get something out of it, both with the WinPE stuff and how ZCM handles disasters. Next week we are going. Here's our write up, and next week we are going on to 2020 Update 2 install and config. So we're going to run that through a few of its paces. ZCM 2020 Update 2. I have some details there as far as things to do. I'm working on the cookbook, so hopefully once it's released soon after, we'll have a cookbook for that as well to give you some reminders and things to be concerned about with your Update 2 install or upgrade. All right. So I don't have anything else. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I hope you have a wonderful week. We hope to get Moises back on in October, and that way we can get a full demo and you can ask some questions and really get some more interaction. I hope his demonstrations were good for today, and look forward to having him also in a future broadcast. All right. I just want to thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time, and I bid you a great week. Thank you so much.